From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
I, Prophet of Esports, joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis.
Yeah, we got the book of Esports out. It's a big deal.
So everyone knows me as the Prophet and William as the Professor.
They may call me the Prophet, but in my life outside of the business of esports, I have worked on the investment side of the table for the better part of the last 2 decades. The single fastest growing area of gaming and esports is gambling. It's booming right now. You don't need to be a prophet like me to see that. However, as an investor, I've stayed away from gambling and betting companies because of the reputational risk and often shady nature of the companies involved. This was true until now. I've recently bought stock in a new public company called Esports Entertainment Group, or EEG, which is focused on esports and gambling. The big difference that changed my mind is that EEG is a public company, NASDAQ listed, and fully regulated, focused on esports betting. The regulatory and audit requirements of a public company are key in my mind to provide the needed transparency for players, bettors, and investors. I had an opportunity to host the CEO of EEG on this podcast a couple of months ago, and I was very impressed by his vision for the company. We've stayed in touch, and I'm delighted to announce that they've accepted to become a sponsor of the podcast. If you're a family office, institutional investor, or investor of any kind, really, Esports Entertainment Group, ticker symbol GAMBLE, GMBL, might be one of the best ways to get exposure to the esports betting space and gaming in general. Make sure to check them out at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. Having said that, I need to make sure to state that this is only my opinion. I'm not an investment advisor or selling stock in the company. Please make sure you do your own research and seek advice from a licensed professional if you're looking to invest in the field. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. I am Paul Dewalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, William Collis. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for leaving all the 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you for sharing the podcast with your friends. We really appreciate it. This is how the podcast has grown. By the way, if you haven't already, go buy William's book, The Book of Esports, on Amazon. And if you've bought it, go leave a review on Amazon. We know thousands of you have bought it and thousands of you have not left reviews. And so just go do it. Go do it. The Prophet says you have to go leave a review. Go leave a review. Pause the podcast and go do it. Right, William?
And the Professor thanks you so much because it really does help others discover the book. It's huge. Yeah. Well, Paul, wow. I mean, this is always such a fun time. I'm thrilled to be here with you. This is like every podcast is a fresh box of joy, you know?
So I will be honest, William, you twisted my arm this week.
I did a little.
We had to start the episode with Heroes of the Storm news.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. I twisted it.
So what is the big Heroes of the Storm news that we should all be?
There's something going on with Heroes of the Storm potentially appearing at DreamHack. So let me just take a look here.
But how does this make sense in the context of, I thought Activision Blizzard just said, we give up on Heroes of the Storm esports.
Well, who knows? But DreamHack has announced something which is like at home, an interactive experience, DreamHack Beyond. And I guess there's a possibility that Heroes of the Storm is part of this at home interactive experience.
So what you're saying is you've still got a chance at this pro gamer thing. There's still a chance.
I am hoping so much that there is still a chance. So much, Paul. So much. We'll see. But
Well, it should make for an awesome tournament. You and the 6 other people who play the game will most definitely put on a great show for DreamHack, I would guess. I mean, come on,
Paul?
William. What do you expect? You want to start with a Heroes of the Storm story, and you don't want me to poke fun at you.
You know,
I gotta
Paul,
know what you expect.
I don't even know what to tell you. I'm just so proud. You know what I mean?
128 episodes in here. You have to expect this at this point.
It is. It's what I'm known for.
We have an absolutely incredible guest this week. It's just been, and we have this incredible run, by the way, of guests coming up starting this week. We have none other than Nick Gruce, who is an analyst at ARK Invest, specialized in gaming, looking at the gaming sector. Nick, welcome to the Business of Esports podcast.
Thank you for having me on, Paul and William. This is amazing. It's fun watching you in the background talk about all this news up front.
Nick, for our listeners who maybe don't know you or don't know ARK Invest, would love if you could give them a bit of background on yourself, how you got interested in the gaming space, what you did before ARK, what you're doing at ARK, what ARK does in general, if maybe, a lot of there may be people who don't know. Would love for you to give some of that background.
Sure. Yeah. So my background, I've been with the firm for 2.5 years. Of those 2.5 years, I've been an analyst at ARK for about 1.5 years. And I work on the next generation internet theme. So if those are, listening are not familiar with ARK, we're focused, and we're asset managers based in New York City. We're solely focused on disruptive innovation within the public equity markets.
And could, I'm just curious, what, day to day, what are some of the themes that you're most excited about? What are some of the things you guys are doing, looking at? I guess I'm just curious internally, what is your process as an analyst looking at the gaming space in general?
Sure. Yeah, this is it's a fun story to tell and how we really started to approach gaming. And I'll say, just to broadly define my coverage, it's not just gaming. I actually focus on, I would describe the umbrella term as digital entertainment. So that's inclusive of social media, streaming platforms, and gaming. I would say those are kind of the 3 primary buckets here. And the way that we started approaching gaming initially, and this is now going back 1.5 years, really when I first started as an analyst, was when I was, starting to ramp up. We were focused primarily on the social media platforms, but starting to understand that some of these services on kind of the periphery of gaming, like Twitch, like Ahoya in China, Douyu, Africa TV, all of these services are starting to broaden out the gaming ecosystem. And what I mean by that is, you're bringing in traditionally non-gamers and you're offering them an experience to enjoy gaming without actually having to game. And I think that was a really aha moment for ARK and myself, is understanding that, for the first time in the history of gaming, you now have these massive distribution platforms that users far and wide can watch their favorite gamers and games be played. So it's a learning, social, it's everything that, is offered in traditional sports, in traditional games. But I think that was really the moment where we said something new is happening in gaming, and we started to take a deeper look, and we've just uncovered layer after layer of exciting opportunities.
I absolutely want to dig into this, and I know, William, you do too. But I would love because I always love, the personal story too. Was there any personal passion around gaming, or did you grow up as a gamer? What was the personal interest in this sector, or is it just you just saw such a massive opportunity that you said, "Hey, I want to be a part of that"?
I think it's both, and I think this comes back to the idea that as investors, I think it's really hard to be a sideline investor with gaming. So it helps that, I'm tried and true Xbox since I was a kid. I've played every AAA game. I've moved on from those, and I've started to get into the weeds of gaming. So I think that definitely helps. So I have a gaming background. I've been playing since I was a child, and I understand kind of the growth of the industry. And I think that's helped us kind of shape our view around gaming, and it does help to have someone on the inside of gaming. And that's, when we're doing research, we're reaching out to gamers. We're actively trying to understand, the users of these platforms, because they're the ones that best understand what's happening on a day-to-day basis within this ecosystem.
So I want to. Can I jump in? I got a really
of course,
kind
man.
of
Go
burning
ahead.
to ask. So I'm interested in that you said the coverage that you had sort of started with social media, right, and social networks, and broadened into gaming. Because one of the big things I've been wondering about recently quite a lot is the parallels between these new gaming platforms like Twitch and the streamers and just even other tools like Discord that are in the space and traditional social networks. And so I'm curious, could you expand on that in terms of the similarities and the differences that you see as, ARK Invest, right, between, say like a Twitter and Twitch? Because I think it's really important to understand those differences and the similarities.
Yeah, I think there's two pieces to your question, and there's the one piece in terms of these secondary platforms that help the distribution of gaming, and that's these Twitches that kind of act as a Twitter, right? This is a platform and channels for gamers to communicate and specialize where it's solely focused on gaming. So Discord's another great example that you bring up. I think Twitch is, kind of the tried and true. That's what everyone thinks of when they think of social and gaming. I think the other piece, and this might even be more interesting to talk about here, is social within gaming. Not just these secondary platforms, but game developers now building in social features within AAA games and having that as a primary function. So the gameplay is now not the main draw. It's actually going on to these platforms. So now you're kind of removing the Twitch, you're removing the Discord, and you're actually, let's use Fortnite as an example, right? You're not going to Battle Royale with your friends. You're going to Party Island to watch concerts, to hang out with your friends after school and communicate. And it's just a more interactive form of communication, the likes of which we've really never seen. I think you're taking traditionally 2D experiences, right? Just communicating on a screen, and now building it out into kind of 3D. And this is, now getting into additional hardware that's needed for this experience to continue to scale. But I think that's another piece here, is that game developers understand how important social is, how important it always has been, and are really starting to implement features within games to capitalize on that.
Nick, so do you believe? Sorry, William. Go ahead. If you have a follow-up, go ahead.
I'm just curious. Like, so Fortnite's a good example. Is there another like developer that you look at as ARK Invest that you think is like leading edge in terms of integrating social features into games, and sort of like what's the feature that stands out in your mind?
I think Epic is a great example. I think the other one that we've looked at internationally has been C Group. So this is Garena Free Fire. This is the largest mobile game in the world. And you've seen the progression if you're kind of following this company. And you've seen within Free Fire, they're building out, it's almost like a step or two behind what Fortnite has done, but they're building out those same experiences at a mobile level. I think even not, and I don't know every single game developer, now we're talking in the long tail, but even within those games, right? Some of the games that have climbed to the top of Twitch and Zeitgeist this year in terms of Fall Guys, I think those have really balanced the gameplay versus the social. And it is also important to realize how important Twitch is as a distribution mechanism for the long tail of content here and the long tail of gaming. But I think you're seeing it far and wide. But I think, the primary example, another example I would give was probably Garena. I think what they've done with Free Fire at a mobile level is akin to what Fortnite did for console and PC.
Nick, I just want to push this a little bit further, because when I think of ARK Invest, I always think of you guys are looking at the future probably more than anyone else, more than any other investor on the planet, right? This is almost all about the future and really pushing that envelope. Do you see gaming really disrupting social media essentially long term, and what we think today of as social media really being games first 20 years from now, or virtual worlds first?
Yeah, this is a perfect plug for our Big Ideas presentation this year. And it was titled Virtual Worlds, because I think, as you point out, games are transitioning. We're in this, I would say, awkward phase where they're now, turning into the new social networks. But they're ultimately going to accumulate enough, engagement and interactivity that you can then start viewing them as one-off virtual worlds. And then, so what happens after virtual worlds? Now we're kind of climbing this ladder. Then you start to have new protocols built out into this ecosystem that start to allow for virtual worlds to interact with each other, right? So talk with each other. You can jump from Fortnite to Call of Duty. Probably not the best example. I don't know that their developer communities would allow that from a monetary standpoint, but you can see how this idea, we're building towards what futurists have deemed the metaverse, right? This is this idea that in the future, we're all going to be having the ability to jump from virtual world to virtual world. And we're going to be spending more time than ever in these digital worlds and economies that are going to grow from them. I think that's really kind of the way that we've started to view this. And traditional gaming is absolutely key to that, because the content and the IP that they've built up over decades now is going to be critical to the worlds and activities that consumers are going to want to interact with.
I'm just curious, and you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, but I always like getting the investor sort of viewpoint here, which is, are there any trends you see today in gaming in general that you think won't last, or are maybe more short term, that aren't part of your ARK's sort of overall thesis around the future of entertainment and digital entertainment? Like, is there anything in the industry you see that you go, exciting maybe right now, but not long term?
Yeah, I can't think of some, maybe I'll reframe the question a bit in terms of, something that I think we're trending towards, and that's the real, mass adoption of game engines. So now we're talking about Unity and Epic Games, not by just, AA and single A and indie game developers, but by AAA game developers. I think if we go back and look at kind of the biggest blow up of the year in Cyberpunk 2077, and what happened when you try to dedicate, now you're talking years and hundreds of millions of dollars to build out and build on kind of a siloed game engine. When you have the tools and you have the ease of use of what a Unity and an Epic's Unreal Engine allow for, I think we're trending towards that. So I guess on the flip side, I'm saying, these siloed game engines, I think, are going kind of away, and we're going to keep trending towards open game engines, because when we talk about getting into the metaverse, right, having that base layer protocol where everything's run on the same engine, I think is going to be very critical.
That's super interesting, though, because first of all, I think it's interesting explanation for the Cyberpunk challenge, which is too much time on a proprietary engine, not enough time to develop the game. But I think it's a very compelling underlying point, right? That it's almost like it's a necessary precondition for the metaverse, but it's sneaking in through business rationale, right? Because what's happening is it's just more cost and time efficient to use commonplace engines. But it turns out a commonplace engine is opening a doorway, for interconnectivity. That's a pretty fascinating point, Nick. Is there anything else you can add around that in terms of like other factors you see seeding the metaverse?
I think so. This would probably just send me on a tangent and it'd take up hours. But I think we have to start understanding that the metaverse is open. It's not going to be siloed in different buckets. And so I think understanding what's happening in kind of the decentralized crypto space with NFTs and those protocols that are now open internet, I think those, I don't yet have an answer of how they're going to fit in, but I have kind of the thesis that they're going to be critical and very important. The other piece here, I think, is to understand that the metaverse, like Roblox, is going to be mostly user generated. And that's why I think the trend towards open game engines is critical for this, because you have to understand that historically building a game, a AAA game, has been so time intensive, so costly, that it makes it so that there's only a small group of developers and companies that can actually do this. What happens when you hand the tools to everyone that understands, how to use a computer, in the same way that you handed someone Instagram 10 years ago and said, here, you can now take professional grade photos. Now you hand them the software to create professional grade gaming and virtual worlds. That's going to be like a Cambrian explosion of opportunity within the gaming space. And I think we're close. We're like maybe a few years away from that Instagram moment in gaming. If not, we may have already passed it. But I think that's something to monitor, because the user generated, right, to build out a new world in or the metaverse, it's not going to be one or two companies. It's going to be millions, hundreds of millions of individuals contributing to this.
That's a really interesting take, right? Because I think there's a recurring question I get, at least, and when people ask me about the metaverse, to people who are really outside of gaming, I try and use the examples of a Star Trek holodeck or like Ready Player One. But in that Ready Player One kind of world, right, it's one company that owns the platform and therefore one winner. And yes, there's maybe a bunch of, other user generated content inside of it, but fundamentally the platform's one winner. Is what I'm hearing from you, Nick, is that you believe there definitely won't be one platform winner in this metaverse future.
That's a good question. I don't know that I have the answer. This is kind of my hope, right? My hope is that it errs on the side of decentralization, where there's not one company that controls, like in Ready Player One. But I could see that scenario in, that is entirely possible. I wouldn't, write that off in any way. Given the way that if you look at history, right, that's usually what happens, right? You usually have a few companies rising to the top. So to say that it's going to be different this time is, it's an interesting take, and that's the take I'm going to stand with. But history hasn't been on that side. So I hope this is the way we go, but who knows, really.
Little bit of an off the cuff random question, but given kind of again the long term focus of ARK, I think it hopefully is fair to ask. So obviously, metaverse is pretty important, not just for gaming, but like for our entire society. So given that your sort of thesis is there's a metaverse coming into being here, and we're seeing common factors being seeded, do you sort of think about the role that government might play and potentially government regulation of this as, a new communication interaction channel? And does ARK have any theses or opinions about what might happen in terms of, the government's role in the space?
Yeah, that's another great question. I don't know that we've really internally talked too much about how the government's going to play a role in this. But I think, again, to just draw a comparison, I think, they've taken the approach in the past with the internet, right? It just to allow and monitor. Because if you stifle growth from the beginning, and you put into laws before you truly understand something, I think that's where you get into a very slippery slope. Because you build out laws that inhibit the growth of something that is going to benefit everyone in the world. So I think you have to understand that, one, for governments of the world, this is an opportunity to really come together and build something that everyone in the world can connect with, and like the internet. And so that's kind of where I think that will trend towards. I mean, again, this is a hope, right? I hope that they kind of allow it to grow organically, and then once problems start to arise, address those when they have a full understanding of what this technology really is.
William, sorry, do you have another question?
No, go for it, Paul. Go for it.
I guess in terms of the way ARK looks at gaming, again, I come back to some recurring themes here on the podcast, and one is power of the publishers, right? And in this more open world that you're describing, how do you guys look at all of these walled gardens that are being built around publishers and their own IP and their own games and their own ecosystems? Like, is this, as an investor, right, looking even in the next 5 or 10 years, I would think you look at that and go, this is great, right? Because it makes monetization so much better. But your 20-year thesis, if we end up with 50 different walled gardens, maybe this is not conducive to a metaverse future. So how do you balance those two from an investment standpoint? And how do you look at the publisher power / walled garden issue, if you even want to call it that?
Yeah. So I guess the analogy I would draw is, and again, this goes back to some of my coverage in a different area, but looking at kind of legacy pay TV and what's happened in streaming. So if you think of kind of the streaming ecosystem as this decentralized version of the metaverse that has been built out, all of the kind of groundwork has been built out, and now it just takes adoption from traditional, in this case, publishers, not pay TV, broadcast TV providers, to come over one by one. You'll have it happen very slow. And this is across all innovation, right? It happens very slow and then all at once. So I think you'll start to see forward-thinking publishers building and tiptoeing into kind of this new space, this new metaverse. And then you'll have a moment like what we're currently witnessing with pay TV, where everyone, the floodgates open and everyone starts to build towards this new protocol. There aren't today incentives for Epic to open up and start talking with Activision, right? Or Roblox to open up and start talking with Minecraft. In the future, if you build out kind of that base layer, those building blocks of the metaverse, that's what you're trying to have happen. You're trying to build out new monetization and incentives for these companies to say, look, in the past, putting up gardens and walls, that's been the way that we keep monetization for ourselves. But it's actually better to build for everyone because we're going to own a sliver of this pie that is now 3, 4, 5, however much larger.
How do you guys look, Nick, at the casual or hyper casual space in the context of gaming? Is it something you're really excited about, or is it, is it just does it not feel like real gaming to you guys and not on the path to that future? And so therefore it's like, we're not that interested, even though it's a, piece of the market that makes zillions of dollars.
Yeah, I think casual for the most part can kind of be bucketed into mobile, right? The large majority of mobile games are very casual. You're talking about like Solitaire, Tetris, kind of these very interactive, not mentally intensive games. I think they have their place, and I think they will always have their place. And it's important to understand, right, when you're dedicating hours of a day to playing video games, to be, glued to a screen and trying to, in a first-person shooter game, read the map and defend yourself and trying to attack someone else, that takes a lot of mental power to do. So I think when you understand like a gamer, you have these, it's a scale, right? And so helping build out the ecosystem, and I think our numbers suggest that there's 3 billion gamers globally. Now, when you say that number, you say, and you think in your head, you say, there's no way that there's 3 billion people playing a Call of Duty level game every single day for 1 hour a day. And you're right, that's not the case. Those highly built out AAA games are only a fraction of the market. They get the most talked about, but they don't bring in the most revenue. Like you say, mobile is the largest category. Of mobile, casual is the largest. So I think it's kind of a way to bring in new gamers, so non-traditional gamers, right? You have now 2 avenues. You have this, let's watch and interact at a social level on these sites like Twitch or Discord, kind of be on the outside. But then also within casual, you have kind of like a gateway drug of, hey, come, try this game. And then you kind of step up. And if you really enjoy this, you start to build towards more interactive gaming.
So it is part of your investment thesis. It's not like you're saying, hey, we're sitting on the sidelines when it comes to mobile or casual or hyper casual.
No, and mobile has been kind of a central thesis for us. And I think what mobile did, if you look back at the last 10 years, mobile was probably one of the most important moments in gaming, right? When iOS opened up its app store, the first 1,000 apps, if you were to break out a percentage of them, the majority of them are gaming. And what mobile unlocked, and it's trickled now into both console and PC, it started a revolution in free to play. This has now trickled into Fortnite and some of these large AAA games. And it also started to build out the idea of new monetization options, right? So when you move to free to play, now you have to figure out how to make up that money on the back end. And so what they built out for mobile is, virtual goods or currency skins. Now, today we're very familiar with this. Back in 2010, not so much. And I think that's important because if you look at the percentage of revenue that's built on virtual goods versus, paying up a premium to buy a game, in 2010, it's 20% of the, total revenue of the market is in virtual goods. Today, you're at 75%, and that's because of mobile. So 75% of a $170 billion industry is coming from virtual goods, which is mind-blowing. And again, you can really, it's a massive opportunity. And it's not talked about, and it's really not well understood for most investors, I think, because of how intricate the ecosystem is and everything you need to understand to get what's happening in gaming. And again, it's that mobile push starting a revolution with virtual goods. Now you're taking down, and this is now two trends, right? We talked about on the developer side, this cost decline coming down, trending towards open game engines. And then on the consumer side, you have costs coming down, gearing towards free to play. I mean, this is everything you need to have this industry continue to grow at an accelerated rate for years. And that's really what we forecasted.
So, just kind of interesting question here, I guess, or interesting follow-up about, risk to publishers here, because as great and as powerful as an opportunity like the metaverse and all of this stuff that, we've described is for game developers, also what you're describing here in terms of costs coming down to make games and pricing coming down to the consumer, right? That sounds a lot like Economics 101, perfect competition, right? Where you can have tons of people offering supply and all the profits get competed out of the space. Do you think that what's being described here is, because of the proliferation of opportunity, a risk for the traditional publishers? Or am I misreading that and it's an opportunity, it just needs to be handled correctly?
I think it's a risk, but I don't think it's something that today, you need to be sounding alarms for. In terms of, when you look at, true gaming IP, it is very hard to get it right. To build a Call of Duty, to build a Fortnite, there's a mixture of luck and skill all in that, right? You have to kind of hope that it times perfectly in the market and you hit kind of a new trend. But once you do that, once you have that IP, it's going to last we really haven't seen one of these, pieces of gaming content really fall off. Like if you think about, GTA, Grand Theft Auto, this started in 1997. I was looking at Twitch this week. It's the -- most streamed game 24 years later. I mean, that's incredible. So I think once you have that IP, it's really yours to lose. But these publishers are smart. They understand the trends. So those are always going to be very, very important. And especially as you trend towards the metaverse, right? When you think of, a consumer, where am I going to go today? They're going to go, I want to go to, the Call of Duty, fields, right? Or I want to go to Fortnite Island. It's going to be like that type of content will last for decades and decades. And I don't really think it's going away.
I mean, I know William eats up this sort of IP point because
my Disney point. It's the only
Disney
thing
point.
I say.
Disney.
William's the whole thesis, Nick, if you haven't heard, is every great company eventually becomes Disney. And so, which it's brilliant. We have to put it on a T-shirt at some point.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. It's like, but yeah, it's interesting because it's funny. It also makes the parallel to traditional social networks more explicit, right? Because if you kind of think about it, like Twitter, an example, right? Like anyone can create a Twitter account, but the IP, aka like the branded personalities on Twitter, they're doing just fine, right? Like they're able, despite the infinite scalability of competitors, they're able to hold the moat because their IP is differentiated and that is not easily clonable. And so it is interesting that like the proliferation of potentially games development or other things that you're talking about might make the games market behave more explicitly like a traditional social network.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I go back to the idea of, thinking about a company like, or, the content IP of a company like Nintendo, right? That's something that I grew up with as a child. And I put in hours. We're talking hundreds of hours in as a child. That doesn't just, fade away in memory, right? You're always going to have those, flashbacks and memories when you see a GameCube, a Nintendo 64, right? You see all of the characters from the Mario universe, right? And that is important. That stays with you. And that allows for a company like Nintendo to continue to build out game after game around this IP. So once you get the IP right, and I think, Fortnite, Call of Duty, GTA, there's tens of hundreds of examples of this. Once you get it right, it's really hard to screw up. It's really hard to screw up because you have people dedicating hours of their life to something, and that doesn't just go away. That stays with you. It becomes part of you. You start to love it. You start to want to engage with it. So I think, yeah, and it's similar to social media, right? You don't just forget all the time you've spent, hanging out with or talking with friends on Facebook, or, the build up. And this is where I am a child of the internet. I grew up with this. It's not just going away.
We're still waiting for Strauss Zelnick to come back on the podcast and announce GTA 6. So our listeners can stay tuned for that. For sure, the big announcement of GTA 6's launch date will happen here first, guys. You can bet on that. I just have a two-part question, Nick, to end with here, which is you mentioned virtual goods, obviously in the context of mobile, but virtual goods are very much in the news cycle right now, all around NFTs and the intersection of NFTs and gaming. Two questions. One, how are you and ARK thinking about NFTs and primarily their integration or relevance to gaming? And second, why has ARK Invest not yet purchased the world's first esports NFT, which was minted by the business of esports? Because it is still for sale, and I would argue, and you could take this right to Kathy, that this is probably the greatest investment of the decade. And I don't know why ARK wouldn't want to own it, but
how much was it, Paul? How much did you price it at? It was very affordable, right?
It's 420 Ethereum.
Oh, that's
and I just
nothing.
think
That's nothing.
It's very, I mean, it's a drop in the bucket. ARK Invest manages what, 60 billion, 70 billion, something like So sorry. There was a real question in there.
Yeah, I'll answer the real question. I'm gonna skirt around that second part there. Okay. But to answer the first question, and just to preface this is a working thesis, right? We're talking about this on an almost daily basis because of how much excitement's built up in the space and with non-fungible tokens, and the intersection in gaming. And I think, it's been happening for a year, 2 years. Really, NFT started, and I think in 2017, you can kind of go back to kind of the introduction of ER720, CryptoKitties, and the growth from there. But I think it does center around this idea of, if virtual goods are going to be the primary monetization method, and you're going to continue to build towards this metaverse, then you need to build out real world or virtual economies. And so you have to introduce the same ideas that our real economy run on, and that's scarcity as a primary function, right? Supply and demand. When you introduce, and what non-fungible tokens allow for is allowing for there to be a supply and demand, an open marketplace, and scarcity. And I think that's really important. And it's especially exciting when you start thinking about gaming, because, I say NFT, I think everyone closes their eyes and they see a picture of a meme and they say, oh, that's $10,000 and it shouldn't be $10,000. And it's a lot of focus on art today, right? And I would, describe that and this might, upset some people, but it's almost non-functional in that, you can look at it, you can hang it up in a digital display, but beyond that, there's really nothing you can do with it. But within gaming, when you start to introduce NFTs, you now have everything that we're already used to in terms of virtual goods. So skins, guns, everything that we have in games. And this is, imagination's the limit here. But now you introduce scarcity, and you introduce a marketplace. So now when you spend hundreds of dollars on Fortnite skins, you can actually then go around and sell that. And Fortnite's not the best example here, but we're now talking about kind of in the decentralized space. And so there's a lot of exciting projects that I've come across. And I think it's really important. And I think that's why, going back to my prior comments, that's why I think, decentralization is so important to the metaverse and the future of gaming, because you have to build on these new protocols that allow for kind of these markets to exist.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think the example when William and I discussed it that I had brought up was, why isn't World of Warcraft minting one-off, incredible swords or something, as an NFT, and only the holder and an owner of that NFT can wield the sword, right? Like, to me, that's where it starts to make sense. But also the world's first esports NFT, which everyone can go check out. It's a collectible. I don't know why anyone wouldn't want to own that. William, unless you have questions, I want to move on to some news here.
No, we should probably do some news. We should probably do a little bit of news. There's quite a lot of news.
Do a little bit of news.
Yeah, just a little.
We've got some big stories this week, guys. The first, and this one was rough for me. And William knows I'm a big lover of MMOs. This was from HindustanTimes.com, and it was about Amazon Games canceling the Lord of the Rings game that they announced in 2019. The subheadline here, again, which is very, very frustrating, is Amazon's incoming CEO, Andy Jassy, said earlier this year that he was committed to the video games division, which launched under outgoing CEO and Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. So, and we did talk about this on the podcast. They had said they were committed to gaming, and yet made this probably their biggest announcement, like their biggest game that they had planned, is now being canceled. And this is now one in a long line of games that seems to have been canceled at Amazon. The last one was Crucible, right? Or
Crucible.
Crucible. And I just, before we jump into this and I get your guys' opinion, I just want to read the headline from a separate story here, which is Amazon doesn't get gaming was the headline, which I think is interesting. So what do you guys make? And Nick, maybe start with you here, right? What do you make of Amazon's gaming strategy as a whole? Because they have Twitch, which should be the foundation of a great gaming strategy, but then it seems all of this mess and mismanagement around the games themselves. How do you look at Amazon's gaming strategy as a whole?
Yeah, it's an interesting time for Amazon. And I think, taking the keys from the past cancellation in Crucible and, licking their wounds there and trying to move on to this kind of new game in Lord of the Rings. I think it was probably a smart move. I don't know that Amazon has the right DNA to be a AAA publisher in gaming. This is not a business where you can be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I think you have to be 100% committed, right? And so I think on the opposite end, you have the distribution in Twitch. And, we've always looked at Twitch and some of these live streaming services as potential gateways for cloud gaming. So if you can think of those as kind of the first layer or the platform that you go to, not just to watch live games or gaming, but also to play. And I think it's a really natural evolution for some of these live streaming platforms to start to integrate cloud gaming in there. So I would love to see something like that happen within Twitch, within YouTube gaming. Facebook is starting. If you read the tea leaves on Facebook, they're starting to hint towards this. And I think Amazon should stay focused on the distribution because that's what they're good at. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
No, so let me just ask a follow-up here. Does that mean you are excited or optimistic about Amazon Luna, which is their cloud gaming service?
Cautiously optimistic. Let's leave it at that. Okay. I think, so that was an interesting one, right? Why are you building out an entirely new cloud gaming brand when you have Twitch? Twitch is, for most people, it's a household name, right? Yeah. You say Twitch, most people are not thinking of like an actual physical Twitch. They're thinking of that platform. So why build out an entirely new brand just to almost compete? Because all of this is competing for time. So
So
why
Nick,
not just integrate?
Sorry, one last question, William. Sorry, I'm gonna come to you in a second here, but like, we had this discussion on a previous podcast where Amazon was testing a gaming e-commerce store. Amazon was testing a gaming e-commerce store in Singapore, right? Like a dedicated sort of storefront that aggregated gaming products from across Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And my question was, why not put this on Twitch, right? Like you have a gaming brand already. Do you have any insight as to why they don't want to consolidate all of their gaming stuff under Twitch? We have speculated, but I'm really curious if you have a thesis here.
I'm in the same bucket as you. It's all speculation from our end, because it really does. You scratch your head when you start to see some of this news. And Amazon's one of the greatest companies in the world, and there's not a question about that. But it really does. You start to say to yourself, you have this gem of an asset in Twitch. Why not try to build this out? I'm in the same bucket. I'm in the same bucket as you. I'm speculating. I'm curious.
William, you literally wrote the book on game and game frameworks around game and game publisher success, right?
Yeah.
And I'm hearing a bit of a big sigh here.
I collective sigh from me too. I don't know what to tell you, like just massive sigh. I actually want to return to the original news story, because what kills me about this story in particular is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I'm not so good at pop entertainment news, but I believe Amazon also has a massive Lord of the Rings TV show in development, correct?
Yes.
And
correct.
I believe it's also supposedly the most expensive TV show of all time. Like that has been something that has been... I think what I've seen something about it, which is like if you add in all the costs, including the commitment to multiple seasons, the cost to license the IP, everything, it would make it. I mean, I'm sure it's a marketing claim to get people excited, but the point is the expenditure has been massive on the part of Amazon. I think one thing we've seen today across all media, and this sort of even goes back to Disney, is the power of multi-channel content, right? Mm-hmm. Like, look at what, Marvel has done in movie and TV and games and, Nick, for you, mobile games, right? It's an incredible force across literally every content platform you can imagine. It kind of kills me to see Amazon miss here, not just cancel a game but to cancel a game that has the potential to be part of a multi-channel strategy for them. And to me, it almost makes me think it's not just Amazon doesn't understand games, it's actually deeper. They don't understand entertainment. Like that. Ooh. That's my, that's my like kind of bomb to drop here, right? Is like, I think Amazon looks at entertainment like another product class. Okay. Like another container that you can, like, it's a TV
like
show
diapers?
Is the same as selling a shoe, right? And I think they miss that entertainment today is so much more than just a single individual category experience. And the fact that if you have that much leverage against a TV show and you have this much leverage, at least verbally, on gaming, the fact that you would let that game go rather than try to fix it or solve it, to me suggests potentially even a deeper problem than gaming itself. So that's my kind of, any reactions? I mean, I'm just kind of throwing that out there for you guys to play with.
It's a hot take.
It's a hot take. It's a hot take. Yeah.
I think when you put it on Amazon on a pedestal with Disney and then compare their kind of entertainment strategy and focus, it's a very fair claim to make. I think when you look at entertainment broadly, I think the MCU and what Disney's done with that IP is probably as good as it gets. And nothing else really has lived up to the MCU and what they've been able to do, as you point out, with that multi-channel strategy. And when you compare what Amazon's doing, they're just botching left and right.
Yeah, I wanted to look
at... It's not just MCU with Disney. It's like everything that they do, right? I mean, MCU is the most visible, but like Star Wars, literally launched their streaming platform on the back of a TV cross-in. So I think it's bigger. But I think it's a fair point to say, if you want to say, if Disney is an entertainment company and you look at their, which it isn't, but let's say it is, Disney's better than that, but leave that alone. Disney's an entertainment company, you compare their strategy to Amazon. Like, I think it's just true that you can see, if you're trying to do entertainment, you have to at least think Disney knows something about it. Why are you not making your entertainment play look more like Disney, you know?
I wanted to believe this was just because it's an MMO, right? Like part of me wanted to believe like just MMOs are really hard to make. It's why WoW has been, top of the pile now for 15 plus years. But obviously there's bigger, mismanagement here. Obviously, like this is not the first failure. Are either of you bothered by the fact that the CEO came out not long after he took the reins and said, we're committed to this gaming thing. And, 2 months later, we see this. Is anyone bothered by sort of what seems like just clear confusion in terms of priorities and direction?
I don't know that I'm bothered by it. It is curious, right, to come out and say that and then pull the rug on your, largest game in development. But I think it is just going back to William's prior point, understanding kind of the core business of Amazon and what entertainment and now you're talking about Amazon Prime Video and gaming really are meant to do. And that's actually to drive traffic back to their core e-commerce business and eventually sign someone up as a Prime member. And then when you think of what Disney's trying to do, Disney's trying to get you hooked onto these characters, buy into this story so that you sign up for Disney Plus, but then you visit Disney World, right? A big ticket item. Then you go spend 6 weeks on a Disney cruise, an even bigger ticket item. So at the core, they're entirely different businesses. And I think it's important to understand that, entertainment for Amazon is just an ancillary way to bring users on into the core business where they really kind of, have value for them.
Okay, so let's speculate and then we'll move on here. I'm curious because I want to put our tinfoil hats on here. Let's pretend we were in the room when this decision was made at Amazon to kill this project. Does anyone have a thesis on what the reason was internally? Like what did that conversation look or feel like if we were a fly on the wall in that room?
Well, I mean, there's another possibility we're not talking about here, which is maybe the game just wasn't, going to be ready for Prime. Like, it just wasn't, what didn't have the bona fides to keep going. Like there is that option, but I don't know. I mean, I suspect if it's a decision to do this, and you believe that Amazon, you take them at their word that they're committed to gaming, right? I suspect that maybe this is a prioritization decision around they're going to prioritize some games more than others, right? That would be the only way. Either it was just a really terrible game that had to get canceled, which I doubt, because there's plenty of talented people who work on things, and it's Lord of the Rings, right? Like there's it could have been probably pretty mediocre and still done really well, right? So I think we can push that to the side. Or if you believe them again that they're serious about gaming, maybe they had other gaming things they thought were more important that they want to advance. But again, that feels a struggle to me when it's Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, like, your theory is that they're shifting resources to some other project.
Well, that if you're serious about gaming and you cancel your Lord of the Rings game, you're either not serious about gaming or you're going to be putting, you can't have it both ways, right? You know what I mean? The resources got to go somewhere else. So, but again, I find it difficult to believe that there are projects that are higher priority than a Lord of the Rings game sounds great to me, So I don't really it's weird. I love to role play, Paul. I'm all for having the conversation, but I don't understand the rationale behind this right now. I really don't. I really struggle.
Nick, do you have a story that you think might fit the facts that we have at least?
Yeah, putting on my tinfoil hat here, I'll throw out maybe just a really wacky idea. I mean, Amazon, they're a data-driven company. What if, they're sitting in this boardroom and they're making this decision on data, and the data is pointing to that the Lord of the Rings franchise hasn't really carried over into this next decade. And what I mean by that is the younger demographic, and this is, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but what if the younger demographic hasn't clung to Lord of the Rings the way that they have with Star Wars, with Marvel?
Interesting. It's a really interesting theory. That's a hot take in and of itself.
Then Nick, push back. Then why don't they cancel their TV show? They're a data-driven company. They have data that says, oh, we made a big mistake here. You know what I mean? Turns out Harry Potter is just it's just crushed it, or I don't know,
Well,
whatever. Yeah.
I mean, maybe the TV show, takes 8 weeks to film and they're 80% done. And the game, they were saying, well, to finish this MMO, it's going to take another 3 years.
It's a terrifying thought for somebody who can go really deep in Tolkien lore. Like that is.
Yeah, I'm sorry to put that into to put that out there.
Time to throw out my Quenya book that I use to study the language. You got to get that one thrown out.
But also just to kind of go back to the two projects they have running simultaneously, right? You have this TV series, and then you have the gaming project, right? What if they're looking at this of saying, let's make sure that the TV show hits and resonates with consumers, and then let's re-spark this game down the line, because really, it's risk to reward here, right? Throwing two projects around the same IP is probably not the best move when you can seed the market with one and then tack on the second one later.
Nick, that's genius, but you know what? Still doesn't quite fit the facts of the case, because the answer there is you delay the game. And plenty of games are delayed forever. That's true. Right? Like,
Well, do you think they would have got more negative publicity, though, William, with a delay than a cancellation? Because the cancellation is sort of like people write it off. It's Amazon. We even us are sort of like, well, they don't know what they're doing. Whereas like delayed, you're like, oh no, the game's gonna suck.
That is actually kind of interesting, and it also fits actually with maybe a more mature. Maybe I'm giving Amazon short thrift, because you could argue they say, okay, we have a lot of eggs. Like you rather than looking at a multi-channel view, you could look at it as an IP-driven view, right? And you could say we have Lord of the Rings IP. We're prepared to put so many chips into this IP. Well, the TV show is the most important thing to get right. If we're going to invest only so many dollars in Lord of the Rings, I'd rather put everything in the TV show, make sure that works, get that base. And we can always do this stuff later. And yeah, we'll miss 2 years of revenue or whatever. But you know what? That would be way better than not starting the, bonfire of success we want in the first place with the bedrock TV show we need to anchor our strategy. So that actually, Nick, full credit. I think that actually that's plausible as an explanation.
It's probably better than tokens fell off a map.
Yeah. I will just say it's still massively disappointing. I've been craving a new MMO. I thought Amazon was going to come through on this one. Let's hope it is. They are just essentially delaying this and waiting for the TV show to be a huge success. But I guess no way of knowing. We'll at some point, I'm sure we'll find out what happened in that boardroom. Guys, let's move on. Actually, quickly, before we get to our last story here, just one quick word. Guys, sponsor of this podcast is Esports Entertainment Group. You guys know, as an investor, I've stayed away from esports betting because of the reputational risk around it and a lot of the shady characters. That's not the case with Esports Entertainment Group. They're a NASDAQ-listed company, publicly traded, fully regulated, focused on esports betting and entertainment. They're the biggest player in the space, the most exciting player. We had the CEO on the podcast. It was a really interesting conversation. If you're a family office, an institutional investor, an investor of any kind, go check them out. esportsentertainmentgroup.com, ticker symbol GMBL. Having said that, just my opinion. I'm not an investment advisor. I'm not selling stock in the company. Do your own research. Seek advice from a professional if you're looking to invest in the field. Guys, our last story today, another biggie. This is going to be another big story. And this is related to Discord. And Discord has been in the news on this podcast a lot over the last few weeks. There were rumors that they were going to sell to Microsoft, or at least Microsoft was talking to them about buying them for $10 billion. Now this article from Engadget this week, Discord reportedly won't sell itself to Microsoft or anyone else. The chat service was said to be in talks with Microsoft for a deal worth at least $10 billion. Supposedly now those talks are off. They maybe reportedly had discussions with other companies that were ongoing as well. Those talks are also off. And the rumor, again, according to this article, is that they potentially now are considering an IPO. So in that context, I guess, question to either of you guys, are any of you surprised that this Microsoft Discord deal didn't happen? Are you surprised it didn't happen at some price, maybe greater than $10 billion? And are you surprised that Discord likely is going down this IPO path. Nick, maybe start with you here.
Sure. I think it's probably very disappointing for the Microsoft side. I think when you look at Microsoft's gaming strategy, the one piece that they are missing is that social, right? They had it, they ended up selling it to, I think it was Facebook, right? Where did Mixer go?
Sell or give it away, or
sure, yeah.
I don't think it was sold. I think it was abandoned, right? Like
right. So I think this would have fit very well into the overall Microsoft gaming ecosystem. On the Discord side, I think this is potentially the right long-term move for them. Once you get grouped into some of these behemoth companies, you can get lost. You can get micromanaged. You can lose focus of what's important to Discord because you're trying to fit the Microsoft narrative. And I think what makes Discord special is if you're talking about some of this stuff that we've been talking about on this podcast, gaming, NFTs, right? That's where you want to go to have your finger on the pulse of the day-to-day, what's really happening in these communities. And I think Discord as a part of the gaming ecosystem is just, it fits so well. It's so beautifully tied together with how gamers interact on the side, how some of these emerging technologies are starting to build up and the communities around them starting to build up. So I think that this could potentially end up being like a Snap dissing Facebook moment, where Snap kind of grows way past what Facebook was offering them at the time, and really could potentially carve out a space all its own.
William, do you have thoughts here? Because I have some follow-up questions also.
I have some thoughts, but I want to hear your follow-up questions first, because I kind of suspect you're going to go where I want to go, and I think you're going to go better there than I do. So, because this feels like the line of questioning I want to go down feels a very Paul line of thinking. So go, Paul, go.
Well, I have an easy question, which is maybe not what you were alluding to here, which is, if there is an IPO in Discord's future, what is this business actually worth, right? Like, what is that number? Because I had said when the original story came out that if Microsoft got Discord for $10 billion, it would be the steal of the century. Like this would I knew this deal wasn't going to happen because everyone knows this company is worth more than $10 billion. As a user of Discord, I know this. But I guess the other line, and William, again, I'm not sure what you were alluding to here, is what does this mean for Microsoft's like overall gaming strategy? And Nick sort of alluded to part of this, right? And we've sort of had some of these discussions on the podcast, which is, they give away Mixer, then they buy Bethesda, then, now they wanted to spend another $10 billion on Discord, right? Like they give away Mixer and then they're ready to spend $20 billion on other gaming stuff.
But this is where I kind of go back to, and I'm not saying, Nick, I agree with this thesis, but let's just, for the sake, you're our guest, and I think it's a smart thesis. So, but let's take your thesis as, this is the content in this world we're heading towards, right? The content is the defensible piece, right? Take that view. Maybe Microsoft says, you know what? Why do we want to buy it? It's not content. Why do we want to buy a non-content service when we think the nature of the industry is going to be these open pipes that are going to degrade value in these privately owned platforms, and it's going to make all the value come from. Why not take that $10 billion and buy another developer? There aren't that many good ones left. Let's snap up another one, Like, I think, I'm not saying I agree with that, but it's interesting if you take a view that maybe Microsoft has a content-first approach to games, and that's not incompatible with how Nick sees the space evolving, right? Like, maybe they just would rather buy, another Bethesda here. Nick, you want to react to that? I'm giving you a real olive branch there, buddy.
I'm trying to think of, how to, I'll go back to just maybe summarizing my prior points here in that, yes, content is very important, but platforms are, in today's world, equally, if not more important. And so I do agree with your take, even though you're kind of giving me an olive branch here because you're trying to, fit it into my take. But I don't, the strategy that Microsoft has taken in the past, and the way that you've detailed it here, right? Giving away Mixer, buying into Bethesda, and then now dropping the ball on Discord, or, whatever happened behind the scenes. It is, there's not a very clear understanding of Microsoft's, core gaming strategy and what they're really trying to accomplish in the space.
That I want to put, but
With-
I can tell you what I hope their gaming strategy is. It's Games Pass, right? It's like the Xbox, it's I hope, and that's why I kind of like the content explanation you offer there, because like as good as all this other stuff would be, it's pretty clear that games are what drives, Microsoft's subscription services, right?
Sure.
And I think that's the most unique, compelling, value-driven offering in the gaming market today, right? And Microsoft, I guarantee they have data. What moves, more subscriptions for, their games? But it's literally more exclusive games, right? So you could view it as, why would we, if this is our linchpin, if this is the service we want to build everything else around, and we know what propels this rocket ship forward, it's more games, let's just go get more games for now, and we'll let other people figure it out later,
Well, so then, yeah, I mean, and the reason I say it's not clear their my understanding of and I do agree, I think Game Pass is really kind of where they're headed, and have been headed. But why didn't Mixer fit into Game Pass, right? Why wouldn't you integrate that in some fashion or form? How does Discord not kind of build into that net? Like, I think again, you have different pieces to the puzzle, right? Content is very important, but it's not like Microsoft is strapped for cash here, right? I don't really think it's a Bethesda or Discord type of situation. I think it's let's just land grab situation. Let's get it all. So I have to imagine, whatever went on behind the scenes, this is probably a pull away more from Discord than it is from Microsoft, because I do think if Game Pass is the goal, Discord, Mixer, these platforms offer very compelling kind of additional use cases for Game Pass and to shore up the moat around it.
So what does Discord end up trading at, guys? What do we think Discord ends up, assuming the IPO rumor is true, which we don't know? What do we think Discord goes public at?
I'll let William take that one. I don't know that, but compliance team would allow me to speculate.
I will tell you, it's 30 billion. It's the magic number for all gaming companies. If you're a gaming company and you're going public, it's like 30 is the number. You go public at 30 billion, regardless of any fundamentals or anything else.
That's about what the neighbors get. So you should get it too. Yeah,
that's it.
The house is on the same street, so like
that's it.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if you're right, Paul. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens, but I can almost guarantee you it'll be 30 billion. All right, guys, that wraps up this week's podcast. Nick, how can people find you? Anything you want to plug? Any last words for our audience? If you want to be found, I guess, how can people find you?
Sure.
Or should they follow ARK Invest? Totally up to you.
Yeah, ARK is very, very big on Twitter. So you can find all of the analysts there. You can find the ARK account itself. It's ARK Invest. And I think, in terms of our content around gaming, Big Ideas 2021 was a great piece for us. It really is focused. I mean, it's titled Virtual Worlds, but it's focused primarily on traditional gaming and everything we talked about today. So I think that's a great place to start in understanding ARK's kind of thesis around gaming and the metaverse and where we're all headed. And then again, Twitter is the best place to interact with us on the internet.
Where can people find that Virtual Worlds thing?
So that would be on ark-invest.com. And cool. You can navigate through. We have all of our research there, all of our blogs, our white papers, and our big ideas. It'll all be on that website.
Very, very cool. Nick, thank you so much for being here. William, thank you as always. Guys, just a couple of reminders. Tune in every week. After we tape the podcast, we do a live stream, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, every Wednesday evening. So if you haven't been tuning into that and you're a fan or a listener of the podcast, it's a lot of fun. You get to ask us questions. You get to talk about topics that you want to talk about. It's very interactive. It's more laid back than the podcast, and so we have a lot of fun with it. So every Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. Also make sure to follow us everywhere, guys. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. It's all Biz Esports or Business of Esports. And if you haven't already, please go leave a review on Amazon for William's book, The Book of Esports. Tell him how much you love the book, because it really is it's the standard. In my view, and this is what I tell people, it's the standard. If you want to be in the industry, you have to read the book. It's just required reading. So go leave a review on Amazon. And as always, guys, we will see you next week.